Now, this is what I didn't put up on the screen, but I was telling you about yesterday, is that in China, okay, there was some social mobility, but it's extremely rare. It's like hitting the lottery here. Okay, if a male peasant could pass that civil service exam to join the government, okay, then he would rise in status. Now, I don't think I told you about this. Okay, in China, when you pass the civil service exam, it wasn't just you that gets elevated. Now you're the one who has a job, but your family, you kind of carry your family with you. And so your status will also be their status. So, uh, a lot rides on this. As a matter of fact, later this school year, we'll get to a point where we talk about a young man who took the civil service exam not once, not twice, but three times, each time coming that close to passing, but yet not passing. And it seems to have caused a mental break for him because shortly after that third failure, he came to believe that, and this is, by the way, you cannot explain crazy. Do not try to explain crazy. Okay, so you're gonna know that this couldn't be true, but he claimed to be the younger brother of Jesus. Okay, clear, he had a mental break, probably the stress from all this, okay, got to him. But you need to understand, his family had pooled their money, and when I say family, we're talking China here. So we're not talking about the nuclear Western family. We mean like mom, dad, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, okay, had pooled their money to get him tutors, okay, to pass this test. And he failed the test three times. Their money was wasted. Okay. All right. And so he let them all down in that sense. And that pressure probably caused him to crack. And he came to believe that he was the younger brother of Jesus. And he was a charismatic figure because he was able to convince others that yes, he was this spiritual being or whatever. And they began to follow. He started a cult. Okay. And that cult led to what, probably the world's worst civil war. Okay, it was called the Taiping Rebellion, and it was the casualty rate of the Taiping Rebellion. It wasn't equal to World War One, but it was getting up to World War One, and we're talking about a war just in one country, which was China. Okay, and that was, we'll talk about it later this school year. But it's amazing to think that the pressure from this exam led to this horrible event like that, or probably led to this horrible event like that. Can you imagine if Donald Trump were to sign one of his famous executive orders and said that for every student who makes a 5 on their AP exam, their family will be exempt from paying taxes for the next 10 years? Some of you think your families maybe put pressure on you now. Can you imagine if your family found out that they would not have to pay taxes for the next 10 years if you make a 5? Would you want that kind of pressure? No. Okay. But that's kind of what they were under there. Okay. All right. So moving on here. Hinduism. Okay. Hinduism. There is no social mobility here. None. Okay. You have to remain in your caste your entire lifetime, and you must carry out the duties of that caste in order to be able to climb the caste ladder. So this involves reincarnation. If you do your duties, when you are reincarnated, you'll come back in a higher caste. And what caste you're in determined what kind of job you could have and what kind of jobs you couldn't have. Okay, who you were allowed to marry. You could not marry outside your caste. Okay, all right. So if you get like a prompt that asks you to, compare and contrast China and South Asia or India, during the classical period, one thing you would mention is that in China there was some very, very limited social mobility, but there would be none, okay, in India due to the caste system. Yes. Hmm. Hey, the fact that they would let even peasants take the civil service exam, what does that tell you about what did the Chinese see as being important? Education. That's exactly right. Education. Okay. In other words, it wasn't who your daddy was. Okay. It was education. How educated are you? How intelligent are you? Okay. Okay. Moving on. Classical religions. These are your classical religions that developed during period one. Just FYI, Hinduism evolves over time, and so some people put it back in period one, some people put it in period two. Don't worry about it. Okay, it's an old religion. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have a hard start date. I mean, like Christianity and Islam, that you can put your finger on start dates for those religions, but you can't for Hinduism. It's too vague. Yes,
What draws the line between a cult and a religion?
that's a good question. Um,
Cults aren't always religious.
could Yeah, it could be true. Um, for one thing, it has to do with popular opinion. I mean, so for example, the Romans, okay, early on, the Romans considered Christianity to be a cult early on, okay, and so one thing that kind of separates cults from religion is how long they've been around. So if it's been around for a long time, most people usually just go ahead and call it a religion at that point in time. Okay, now Zoroastrianism, we talked about that a little bit already in here. Okay, that's native to Persia, modern day Iran, and we believe that its story of an epic battle at the end times between good God and evil God influenced our ideas of heaven and hell.
I don't know, like Jesus and Satan.
Hmm?
Jesus and Satan are also
Right.
saints.
But Satan's not considered to be a god; he's considered to be a fallen angel. Whereas in Zoroastrianism, there was an actual god of evil. Okay, now that caste ladder we've been talking about, it leads to something, obviously. Okay, what it leads to eventually at the top of the ladder is this thing referred to as moksha, and now uh, it's fine to go ahead and think of that as heaven. It's not exactly heaven, but it's roughly the equivalent. Okay, it's the ultimate goal for the afterlife. Okay, and if you achieve moksha, then you're not going to be reincarnated anymore. You've reached your goal. Okay,
Wait,
now
I'm sorry for interrupting. So reincarnation is like a punishment?
for Hindus, it's not a punishment. It's not just like is literally is climbing a ladder a punishment? No, you're climbing a ladder to get up there. Okay, it's a pathway. Okay, all right. The caste ladder was seen as and reincarnation, which was part of it, was seen just simply as a pathway to moksha or to their version of heaven, okay, so to speak. Okay? Now, if you don't do your duties to your caste, you can actually go down. So I guess you could say that in that sense, it's a punishment like that. So if you're a bad person, then you could be reincarnated in a lower caste. If you're a good person, come up in a higher caste like that. Okay? But the goal here is to end the cycle of rebirth. Now, Buddhism. Buddhism also believes in reincarnation. But there's a difference, though. Would you crack that? Yeah, when y'all leave, just usually just leave it cracked so you can get back in. Okay. Um, Now, because remember, Buddhism derives from Hinduism, so they believe in reincarnation. However, their what they call what their version of heaven is called nirvana. Okay, basically the same thing as moksha. We don't need to get into all the details. I'm sure a Buddhist scholar would argue, but still, nirvana is the ultimate goal. Okay, it's kind of what we would call heaven. But they believed that you could achieve nirvana in one lifetime. So in other words, a Hindu would say, no, if you're in a lower caste, you have to be reborn possibly several times, okay, before you can get to moksha. A Buddhist would say, no. So long as you follow the path that Buddha laid out, as long as you follow the rules and principles that Buddha laid out, you can achieve nirvana, boom, in one go. Okay, think of it like a video game where you've got three lives. But you could potentially you could beat that level in with one life without dying a single time. You beat the level. Okay, that's how Buddhists saw it. Now if you mess up and you die, well then you go back to the start and try again. So a Buddhist would say if now you mentioned punishment. Okay, so a Buddhist would say if you're reincarnated, that's because you messed up. Okay, try again. Okay, all right, and keep trying until you make it. So there really was no limit on how many times you could be reincarnated, but it just here's another try, here's another try, here's another try. But if you're really good at it, you could potentially go straight to nirvana in one single lifetime. Okay? Now, I would put 2 stars by this in your notes, ladies and gentlemen. I am warning you right now. It's a tricky concept because Buddhism is neither monotheistic nor polytheistic. They don't actually believe in a god. Buddha is not a god. And so if you're really interested in the subject, I would say go consult a Buddhist scholar. That's not my wheelhouse, okay? But still, they don't really see it as being a god above us all. Okay? Yes, there's a nirvana, release from the cycle of rebirth, but there's not really a god overseeing everything. Okay. Now, Buddhism started in India, but you don't find too many Buddhists in India today. Most of your Buddhists are in East Asia and Southeast Asia. And that's because of this guy right here, the Mauryan Emperor Ashoka. Ashoka was a very successful conqueror, conquered a lot of India for the Mauryan Empire. He was pretty ruthless too. He made big, huge pyramids of the heads of those who he conquered. Okay. So just big, bloody, pyramids of skulls. But after he was done conquering, he had a religious experience. He converted to Buddhism. And I don't know if you've ever met anybody who's converted to a new religion, okay? But if let's say you've got 2 people. One person was born to the religion, okay? And then this person right here just recently converted to that religion, okay? The person born to it, okay, it's just part of their life. It's part of their life, but it's just another part of their life. Okay? The person who just converted, oftentimes, they're fired up. They want to come talk to everybody about it and tell everybody about their religion. Okay, and that was Ashoka. Okay? Ashoka was fired up, and he was the king, which meant he had plenty of wealth that he could use to spread Buddhism. And what he did was he sponsored Buddhist monks, missionaries, and told them, "You go here, you go there, spread the word of this religion." Okay? And he funded the building of monasteries and these things that, remember, are called stupas. Stupas are Buddhist temples, and inside a stupa is an artifact of the Buddha. Now let's see if you can figure this out, or you may know this. An artifact of the Buddha. What do you think an artifact of the Buddha is? What?
I know it's the pinky finger or something like that.
It's a bone. Okay, it's a bone supposedly of Buddha. Okay, it could be pinky fingers, it could be toes, whatever it might be. It's an actual bone supposedly from the body. Is it really? We don't know. But they have one of these bones, and they have it in a very safe place inside this temple called the stupa, and then people from around the area will come there and worship there. Matter of fact, we probably will look at a primary source document a little bit later where there's a Confucian scholar, and he is mad. He is writing to the Chinese emperor because the Buddhism is moving into China, and one of these finger bones is being brought into China, and he's telling the emperor, "You need to take that finger bone and burn it. You need to go burn this holy artifact right here, okay, and get rid of it." So, all right. By the way, right here, this is going to save you on some tests if you learn this right now. Okay, I'll be coming back to this later this school year. I know I will be. I'll be talking about this. But India is perfectly positioned, okay, to influence and trade other civilizations because of geography. And if you look over here at this map, okay, so here's your Western world, your Mediterranean world, your Roman world over here, okay, and then here's your Eastern, China over here, and India is right in between them. And so India basically has 2 major trading partners, this side of the world and that side of the world. Whereas
the Romans over here, okay, and the civilizations that come later, they really can only trade in this direction to the east, okay, and over here they can kind of only trade in this direction, whereas people in India and South Asia they can trade in both directions. So ideas here influence both sides right here. Okay. Mhm. All right, religious similarities. On the AP exam, expect to get possibly a compare and contrast question. And something that you have to be able to recognize is that when religions spread from one culture to another, they change a little bit. Yes. Hmm. So if you are even a little bit familiar with the Catholic Church, who's the head of the Catholic Church? Good. Okay. The Pope is basically the Roman emperor. Okay. The early Christians were influenced by the Roman Empire structure, and so even when the Roman Empire fell, they adopted that same structure. So the Pope is basically the Roman emperor, and then the bishops and cardinals have their equivalents in the Roman Empire as well. Okay, so it's a hierarchical structure, meaning you've got superiors and inferiors. Okay, you've got bosses and sub bosses. Okay, but and here's another thing. They dropped their early pacifism. What is pacifism? It means you won't fight. You won't do violence to others. Okay. Some of you in here may know in the Bible, there's a famous phrase that you should turn the other. Good. The meaning, like if somebody were to hit you, you don't hit them back. You turn the other cheek, meaning you kind of forgive them. Okay. You give them a second chance, okay, so to speak. Okay. You don't just retaliate. Okay. Well, the earliest Christians would not serve in the Roman military because if you serve the military, what might you have to do? Yeah, kill someone. Exactly. And so that was one reason. It wasn't the only reason, but that was one reason why the Roman Empire persecuted the early Christians by feeding them to the animals and things like that. But it wasn't too long though before Christianity kind of forgot about that pacifism thing. And so today, you tell me, will Christians serve in the army today? Will Christians pull the trigger today? Okay, now you understand. So that was a change right there. Okay, all right. Another change is that when religions move into a new area, it's very common for a religion to take over the holy sites of an older religion, okay, and also to take over the holy days, okay, of an older religion. And Christians celebrate Christmas, okay, at the same time as the winter solstice. Winter solstice was a holiday people were already celebrating, and so as Christianity moved into those areas, okay, they said, oh, well, we celebrate the birth of Christ on the winter solstice, so you can keep on partying and celebrating on the same day. What a coincidence, okay? Christmas trees. Are Christmas trees in the Bible? No, they're not. Okay, they're not. But decorating trees was a practice, a cultural practice up in Northern Europe. And so as Christianity moved up there, they said, oh, yeah, sure, you can keep on decorating trees. Just put an angel on top of it or put a cross on top of it. Okay. And so they adopted that practice that way. It makes it easier to spread your religion, okay, that way. Buddhism, okay. In South Asia, where it started, devout Buddhists, strict Buddhists, if you study Buddhism, it's about denying yourself things. Okay, it could be food. Now be careful. I'm not saying they starve themselves to death, but a devout Buddhist, they're referred to, the term is ascetic. That's one of your vocabulary words, an ascetic. An ascetic is somebody who deprives themselves of things as kind of a holy challenge. Okay. And so Buddhists would not eat a lot. They would eat just the smallest amount so that they could survive. They wouldn't indulge. Okay, they were definitely not materialistic. They didn't try to collect lots of fancy clothes and things like that. They lived a very poor Spartan life. Okay, and part of human nature is to have children, to procreate. They denied themselves that too. Okay, the Buddhist monks did. They would not have children. They would not have families. But as Buddhism moved into China, though, that didn't work very well there because in China the family is very important. Okay, And and when I say family, again, it's not just mom, dad, and the kids. It's mom, dad, grandparents, aunts, uncles. That's, what you think of as a family reunion. Okay. Uh, and so when Buddhism spread into China, they said, oh, sure, you can get married. No problem. Okay. So they dropped that to make it more appealing to the Chinese. Okay. Um, all right. Uh, Christianity and Buddhism, you saw this a lot in chapter 1, are missionary faiths. They actually send people out like Ashoka did to, hi, I'd like to talk to you about Buddhism. Okay. All right. Hinduism does not do that. Judaism does not do that. You're never going to have a Jewish person knock on your door and try to give you some literature or anything like that. Okay. It's not going to happen. Okay. And later, by the way, Islam will also be a missionary religion as well. Okay. They Now here, this is one of your vocabulary words. I'm pointing at it. Monasticism. It's a word that you're probably not familiar with, but look here. I think you've probably heard of monasteries. Okay. All right. And then even a shorter word right there, monks. Okay. They're all connected right there. If you have a religion that practices monasticism, then it's going to have monks and it's going to have monasteries. A monastery is a place where monks live and worship. It's not just a church, okay, or a temple. It's a what you might think of as an apartment complex or dormitory. There's also barns and possibly a mill. Anything that you need, like a place to make clothes. Okay, there could be a winery there. They may grow grapes and make wine. Okay? And so, but the monastery is like a working plantation in a sense, but it's all about God. They're worshiping, they're practicing the religion there. Okay? They're not making money. They're just trying to they're just living. Now in Christianity and Catholicism, you female monks are not called monks. They're called nuns. Some of you may know that. And where they live, they're not called monasteries. They're called convents. So you kind of in Catholicism, this is for men and that's for women. But it's basically the same thing. There's not really any difference. Now, one thing that you should also remember for both of these here, both Buddhism and Catholicism, they gave women another opportunity. Before Buddhism and before Catholicism, okay, a woman's life, she knew it was wife and mother. That's it. Wife and mother. That's it. But once you have monasticism come along, then women could say, okay, I could be a wife or mother, or I could live a religious life in a monastery or a convent and be a nun. Okay. It gave them another option. Okay, this is something that you got a lot of in chapter 1 right here. They spread through major trade networks, and a lot of you told me the Silk Roads on your quizzes. Okay, but you didn't mention the Indian Ocean, even though the map showed that Buddhism was spreading along the Indian Ocean from India to Southeast Asia, and then the Mediterranean. Christianity spread through the Mediterranean. And finally, Christianity grew out of Judaism, and Buddhism came from Hinduism. So if there had been no Judaism, then no Christianity, no Hinduism, no Buddhism. Mm-hmm. And you know that Islam also comes from there as well. So it's an Abrahamic religion. So no Judaism, no Christianity, probably no Islam either. So on a compare and contrast essay, your similarities I've got underlined up here. They were missionary faiths. They used major trade networks to spread, and they came from older faiths. They were derivative religions. And they also changed as they spread. Okay, one more here at the bottom. Hinduism and Buddhism both believe in reincarnation. Differences between these religions. Christianity, the Catholic Church, has a very hierarchical structure, being patterned after the Roman Empire. Buddhism does not. There is no Buddhist pope. They don't have bishops and cardinals in Buddhism. Here's a vocabulary word, secular. It's in your list. It's going to be with us all school year. We're going to use it in different contexts. I'm going to try to help you learn it right now. People who are secular are focused on the here and the now. The things that you can see and hear and touch, okay, and smell. Okay, that's the secular world. Okay. Now, the non-secular world, okay, is a spiritual world. Okay. I'm hoping that you guys can't see or hear spirits. Okay. I'm hoping. Okay. If you hear voices, there's medicine for that. Okay. All right. But the China, and now I'm not telling you the Chinese didn't believe in spirits. No, there's Taoism, things like that. But the Chinese, for their daily lives, the Chinese were much more focused on the practical world. Okay. Whereas in South Asia and India, oh, it was very, very, very focused on the spiritual world. Buddhists reject the caste system, like I told you. They don't think that you have to climb the caste ladder to reach nirvana. And this is one reason why Buddhism catches on. That's very appealing. You know, Hinduism, it's not going to, when you find out that, oh, you have to climb the caste ladder before you can achieve heaven or moksha, that's not going to attract very many followers. Judaism has a single founder, Abraham, and a single text, the Torah. Hinduism does not have a single founder, and they have multiple texts. Now, down there at the bottom, it says, Christians believe men and women are spiritually equal. I capitalize spiritual because what they're saying there is Christians believe that God loves women just as much as men. Okay, God doesn't favor one gender over the other. However, how many female popes have we had? 0. Okay, so you know, in the secular world, you know, it's still a patriarchy, and even in Christianity. Would you let him in, please? Thanks. Okay. Hinduism believes that you have to be a male before you can achieve moksha. You have to come back as a male Brahmin. Okay, guys, y'all have a great 3-day weekend. Be working on your inquisitives and your notes for chapter 2. I'll put them on there.